Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, AmaRouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up. So this is the beginning of a whole series themed around identity and creatives, or identity and creativity, whichever way you want to look at it. Ella and I were talking about this and have talked about this quite often in terms of how much of our identity is wrapped up or interwoven in what we create, or how little of our identity is wrapped up in what we create, and how precious that does or does not make us about the work we make. So we thought we'd kick off the series having a conversation about it ourselves. Ella and I realised that some of you listening may not really know us as artists, so we just thought we'd bring a bit of context to us. Ella began her dance career dancing salsa in clubs and training samba in Brazil, where she paraded in Carnival as a passista in 2006. Ella began breakdancing just before she started her conservatoire training at Laban and London School of Contemporary Dance. She's also the published author of Journal to Joy and director of award-winning company Business Yoga, who won the Prestige Award in 2020. Whoop, whoop! Ella is an artist, a yogi, a writer, a teacher, a coach, and runs a 9-month program for women creatives under Maya Gandaya called The Goddess Path. Ella's been practicing yoga since 2004 and teaching since 2011. She has trained with the Embodied Dancer Yoga Teacher Training, Karam Kriya School, Yoga Teachers College, and practices Kundalini, Ashtanga, Vinyasa Flow, and Yoga Trapeze. She has also trained in Sekam, Chakra Healing, TRE, The Wheel of Consent, which you guys would have heard about in previous episodes. Check them out if you don't know what I'm talking about, and Holistic Pelvic Care. As a trained dancer, performance highlights have included Russell Malafont Company, Lee Anderson, the Chumleys, Olympics opening ceremony, Southpaw and Uchenna. She's also director of international touring Ella Mesma Dance Company.
Whoop, whoop.
So there we go. A little bit of context for you.
It feels so weird to have someone else reading your bio for you. Oh yeah, that stuff. Would you all like to hear about Ama? Yes, you would. Ama is a voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food geek, and creative educator with over 14 years of movement-centered experience. She is committed to enabling people to live their highest truth, find their voice, and inhabit their bodies. Ama's work centers around heritage, identity, embodiment, and females, and seeks to empower, educate, provoke, and dismantle harmful narratives. She chooses to explore and create through visual and digital forms, dance, movement, and voice. Ama is currently developing a somatic-based movement practice and is a business yoga instructor. Her career highlights include voiceover for Cannes XR, choreographing for the formal opening of the 2018 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, main feature in Selfridge's Everybody campaign led by Wayne McGregor, and captured by Norbert Scherner, performing for the Qatari royal family, parading in 2008 Rio Carnival, and performing in the 2012 Olympics closing ceremony. amazing, epic CV. I love reading your bio and just being like, oh, so many yummy adventures that you've been on. And it's so beautiful as your friend to have seen you just blossom and fly.
Oh, thank you, Belita. So lush. Yeah, it's a really beautiful actually hearing your bio read by someone else and also read by one of your best friends. It's like, wow, I've done a lot of things, a lot
Yeah.
of wicked things. It's very easy to diminish what you've achieved and what you've experienced and what you've been part of when it's part of the fabric of your journey. But I think yeah, hearing someone else read it is like, oh yeah, there's been
I also think, oh, sorry.
no, go on.
I was going to say, I also think that there's this, like when we're so busy in it, we don't take time to just appreciate, wow, I did that. And wow, I did that, because we're busy going, okay, and then what? I need to make money, or I need to,
Yeah,
and kind of trying to prove ourselves almost, or trying to succeed. So I think it's really important to just take those moments to go, oh, wow, yeah, I completed that. I created that.
yeah.
So Amma, based on your bio, do you make work that's autobiographical?
Some of my work is autobiographical, yes. Especially when I'm making work around identity, heritage, culture, females. It's really often comes from an exploration and a curiosity about the lineage of women in my own family and how that's informed who I am today and where I am today in the world. And so, yes, I wouldn't say all of my work is autobiographical, but some of it is. Yes.
Awesome.
What about you? Thanks. Hmm.
I find, as a performer, I perform best when I put my story into it.
Mm,
And I'm the same when I choreograph. Like, even if the final product might not look like it's autobiographical, but if it's
mm,
got kind of that heart of like the story that it came from being something very genuine, something that really moves me, or perhaps something that I've been through, or something that I'm kind of exploring or healing from, then
mm,
I think that's how I make the best work. And that it might not be that
mm.
the audience knows that has come from that place, but that's really even if that is like something that I'm really angry about that's happening in the world,
Mm.
but that it's come from that very real place of it's something that means a lot to me and I really want to shout about. Therefore,
So,
yes,
yeah, I was going to say, so yes,
yes.
also. And I love how you talked about, the fact that the end product or the end result may not clearly look like it's come from an autobiographical place, but it has, and just that kind of awareness of how things can travel and journey. And
Mm,
I love that you're aware of its journey and its process,
mm,
but from the outside looking in, it may look very different.
yeah, me too. Yeah, so a little example, my most recent piece of work, or the piece that I'm about to have performed um, online, which you know a lot about, Emma, because you've been involved. Um, that came from something that I learned that someone in my family had said to somebody else in my family, and it was that small comment that was made actually before I was born that kind of triggered or prompted this whole piece to be created. And so
Mm,
that's where, like, it might just be a phrase, it might just be like that small detail, but then that it's like that
mm.
created the ripples in my imagination for me to create a whole piece of work, which is now, got so many different iterations of, so many versions of, and has been such a delight to create.
I love that.
So I suppose in the framework of art, for me, I think this is where the art as activism comes from. Is that like there's a beautiful phrase that someone called Youssef taught me, and it's actually a Brecht quote, which is that art is not a mirror to reflect reality, but a hammer to shape it. And Bertolt Brecht, that is. And I think there's something like just really beautiful in how we can shout what we need to express. That for me, that's where my identity kind of interweaves with the work that I'm making, because it's what I want to shout and scream about. And sometimes I might not feel heard, in other ways, but I can kind of really express what I need to say. And I'm like, is that an opinion? Maybe it's not even an opinion, actually. Sometimes it's just like, this stuff has happened, or, you know, this is what's going on for me. And there's like, even like, this is what I'm making sense of. And it's like, I'm making sense of it by making the piece of art. And that I recognize that that doesn't necessarily mean that it heals or that it changes things. And also that kind of why I'm making it, it's about expression and it's about communication, but it's also about like putting things, giving things a voice that I might feel haven't been given a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose there's an extent of, I might not be trying to change the world, but I might be trying to empower the audience by putting something on the stage that they might not see elsewhere, and that maybe they would like to see on the stage. And so it's like, that's the small ripple, you know, that maybe you get to see something that you weren't expecting to see, or you've been thinking about, but you haven't been able to verbalize. And for me, that's when I'm so inspired by art, is when it's like, it said the thing that I've been trying to express and not quite found the words for. And then suddenly there's this piece of art. It's like, that's it. It's like the power of art over words sometimes, you know. It's like, that's why I love that quote by James Baldwin, that only the poets, you know, that sometimes it's like, it does feel like the politicians aren't expressing the voice of the people, the police aren't expressing the voice of the people, but the artists are expressing it in a way where it like really hits your heart, and your heart just explodes. You know, it's like, yeah, it's just such a beautiful thing to be understood by art, and for art to understand us and express what we need to express.
When you were talking, it reminded me of something I read on Instagram about creating, which Aja Black posted. And Aja said, I create for only 3 reasons. 1, to learn something. 2, to feel something. 3, to learn how I feel about something.
Oh, yes. It's giving me a goosebump. And also, like, for me personally, like, I've made some quite angry works, but it still wasn't to make other people angry or make them, it's not like I thought, oh, I'm going to make other people go out and protest. It was more like, this is my protest and I'm expressing it. And I hope by expressing it, there might be some healing and some release for others as well. Which I know is such a layer, isn't it? Of like, I think this is, I want to go back to what we were just talking about as well. But I think this is something I would love to talk about, is like putting trauma into art, and 2 layers of it. One is whether the performer is kind of also safe and healing by doing that, and like what their reason, not what their reason is, but how do we make sure that as a performer, we're not just doing it because it can get people to come and see something, or it can be what people want. So how do we make sure that as an artist, if we are kind of releasing something like that, that we're not really vulnerable to just becoming kind of like a commodity on the stage? And then also in terms of the audience, like, if you are putting something that's so strong on the stage, how do you also look after your audience? And I think those 2 questions for me are really important when I work with other artists, particularly, you know, if I'm talking about my stuff and it's me putting myself on the stage, that's one thing. But if I'm putting other people onto the stage, it's a whole other layer. Yeah. But going back, because we didn't quite finish, you were going to say something else.
I was about to say, sometimes identity isn't important to the work. And sometimes you just want to make a piece of work because you want to make a piece of work, and it may not necessarily be anything that is informed by your identity in that sense. In the sense of the work has to exist. I have this desire to make this work and it has to exist. And so I'm making it. And sometimes that's it. Sometimes it's even the practice of making work. You know, you just want to be playful, or you just want, but then just as I was saying that to you, I started to think, well, it's still coming from you. It's still coming from, even if there are other people involved, you know, it's still coming from people. People are still contributing themselves to the work. And whatever we bring to the work, surely we can't disassociate our identity from what we're creating,
Totally.
because our identity is part of, it's us, it's a
Yeah.
huge part of us.
And actually, without our identity, we wouldn't make that specific piece of work because it's come from all of our experiences, right? Even if it is, something so small as, I don't know what inspired you yesterday, but all of those things are part of our artwork, and so I think maybe it's impossible to detach our identity from our art. What do you think, that the listener?
And also, like, I kind of want to say identity with a capital I and identity with a small I,
Mm,
because I feel like this, what we're talking about now, with, is it impossible to make work independent from our identity? And we're potentially saying, well, is our identity wrapped up in everything we make because it's coming from us? For me, that would be identity with a small I.
mm,
But if we're asking the question, is your identity a part of everything you create? And identity with a big I, for me, I would be determining that as, for example, if I'm describing my identity, there's loads of things that go into making my identity, but the things that first jump out to me, I would say I am a British Ghanaian, I'm a woman, I have brown skin, I'm a Londoner, etc., etc., etc.,
mhm.
etc., 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 etc. Lots of things that make me who I
Yeah,
am. Um, but so for me, yeah, they would be capital, like
yeah,
identity. Like,
that's
how would I
really
self-define? And so
interesting.
if you ask, so is your identity also part of your work? The big, big, big
The big eye.
capital I identity, capital I identity, is it always a part of my work? No, I would say, not every piece of work I make is me looking at or coming from, I'm a Black British Ghanaian, and I'm a woman, and I'm this and I'm
Mm,
that, explicitly. But is it always going to have my identity in its small life?
yeah.
Yeah, probably, because I'm making the work.
Interestingly, I actually think the work, like as in the work that I make, not if I'm commissioned to do it for someone else, or, that it might be like a project that emerges out of something else, but the work that I kind of choose to make and will apply for funding for and so on. I think the big I is there. And not that I'm saying like I choose it, like it's not that I really want it to be put there, but I think it comes from those questions, those bigger questions. And also, interestingly, generally what I'm trying to do is get to a place where we don't have to judge someone based on their identity. Like, I think that's really the theme of my work. Like, at the core of
Mm,
all of my work, it's like, can we live in a state or a space where we don't put labels on someone else, that they get to decide what their identity is, and where,
mm,
they're really free to be who they are, rather than that kind of being projected on them from other people.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That me saying I don't make work about identity, but on some level, it's really from my life experience, and it's about
yeah,
not being judged on who
yeah.
you are, or being free, like freeing ourselves from the labels.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's a really layered one.
Mm. Ultimately, I feel like the mission behind my work is always at the heart. It's about equality, and it's about, can we make a space for everyone, and can we really treat everyone equally?
Yes to that. I love that. And more of that happening, please.
Yes, please.
I'm quite new to making work. I mean, making work that's born out of myself and what I want to create, not making work in other people's pieces.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm still quite on the early part of my journey, but looking at work I have made so far, whether that's been part of projects I've been working on with organizations, or whether it's been my own personal work, I realized that making work that is centered around my identity really helps me to process things. It helps me to process and understand things I'm learning about myself, things I've learned from learning about my family, my cultures. It helps me question assumptions I have about myself, question assumptions other people have, assumptions I have about other people. It's a real processing. So, in a way, it's kind of, I mean, it is, I think there's a selfishness in making art as well. You know, I was going to say it's a bit selfish in a way. um, you know, I think art can serve self and also community, and also society. Um, and actually, I really like that it can do that. I think it's awesome and it's wonderful that it can do that.
Me too.
Um,
And
yeah,
also that when our cup is full up, we're much better human beings. You know, when you've processed, when you've had that time to
absolutely.
work on your body, when you've had that time to express what's coming up for you, that actually you are able to create the good ripples because you really know yourself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it allows you to be curious as well. I think even making work born out of pure curiosity, you know, there's not necessarily an end goal or an end answer, but it's to maybe to ask lots of questions and to ask those questions of the people coming to engage with your work, to have them ask the same questions, um, which, you know, which personally I think provokes personal growth and personal expansion and transformative action. And I think all of that has a ripple effect from one
Mm,
person to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next in the world.
mm,
And I think that's just as important.
love that.
Um, Thanks, Belle. And that said, it makes me think of recent conversations I've had actually around what work is centered around. And I was asked this year if, as me, so as Amma, as a woman in a brown body, do I feel like when I apply for funding, I have to center my identity, but center the things that may come with my identity that cause me pain, struggle, strife?
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel like I can only receive funding if I'm making work centered around pain, basically? And is
Yeah.
there room for me to make work around joy and just around pleasure?
Mm-hmm.
Will I be funded?
And also programmed, you know, I think that it probably extends to like the theatres and the programmers, like how are they selecting and what's their criteria? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I haven't had a lot of experience in applying for funding, so I couldn't speak to that. But it's clear that that's something that's very much in existence. Um, you know, and it's important for people to be able to express themselves in a multifaceted way and to see themselves reflected in a multifaceted way. You know, if brown people or the global majority are always going to be having to put work on stage, on TV, in writing, in imagery, in galleries, that is always surrounded by, which is always focused on tension and pain and struggle. Not that this isn't important, it really, really is. There's many people who follow my movements and follow me on Instagram, and they'll know that all of this is very important to me. But it's also really important to me to tell a whole story, a full story, and to
Mm,
explore all sides of our identity. So, is there room for all sides of identity and being human? Because there should be.
yeah. And I think that's really important, you know, that we get to make, you know, say, for example, like the piece that I made, Ladylike, I think that was quite angry and quite, you know, heavy. Yeah, it was. And I did know that the next piece that I wanted to make, whilst the core is the same, like what it's really about is still the same, because I think that that's a huge part of my identity as a person of mixed heritage, is like equality. And that's where I'm really coming from. And that's what I'm thinking about every day. You know, that's very much like something I'm faced with on a daily basis, which maybe does mean that the work that I want to make might be different to someone else's, because that's where I'm, like, my eyes are, my experiences are. But I wanted to make it from a place of joy, and it to not feel the same. And so, you know, Foreign Bodies and Underwater Love Story and now A Jellyfish Love Song are both very different works, and really come from that place of celebration, or that kind of I suppose that energy, or that kind of what you come away with is a very different emotion, I hope, anyway. And it is the emotion of joy. That was kind of the emotion that
The
was,
crux of
yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I guess, you know, I'm really grateful that I've been able to make another piece of work. It's such a privilege to be able to make another piece of work, and also to not get pigeonholed, that because I made
Yeah.
that piece that was very angry feminist work, that I was like, I don't want to make another piece like this. And often you are expected to make certain things and to be about
Yeah.
certain things. And it's like, actually, I've moved on even from the content of what that was about. Like, I'm done with that now, and I'm putting that to bed, and I don't want to go
Yeah.
back to that state of thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And also, you should be allowed to make the work you want to make.
yeah,
And that can look so different,
yeah,
you know. And sometimes there are threads between that work, absolutely. And sometimes those threads are really far more visible, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes there aren't any, you know,
yeah,
because as we're saying, we're multifaceted. So, yeah, this idea of being pigeonholed because you've made 2 pieces of work, 5 pieces of work, X pieces of work, that can be seen to be linked in this way, you know.
and yeah, and like, I'm also just an artist, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like 2 things to speak to that. So one, thinking about Where Are All the Women, which I know you've experienced, which is my recent work that I made. I really wanted to, because that work speaks to the lineage of women in my family, and the women in my family are very strong women. One thing that I was really intentional about when I was making Where Are All the Women, which is my recent audio visual work, was to talk about the women in my family, because it's about the women in my family generations back till now. And I was really intentional in painting them fully, because they're all really strong and resilient women, and they've all come through a lot of challenges, but they're also more than that. You know, they were also really soft, and they were also vulnerable, and they were also, my grandma was a ballroom dancer, and intelligent, and also really caring, and also, and you know, I was really intentional and deliberate about not only painting this picture of them. I come from this lineage of really strong women, and therefore X, Y, and Z is seen in me, or X, Y, and Z has been my experience. I really wanted to pay them their dues and go, yes, they're that and they're all of this, because there is that potentiality to pigeonhole people all the time. And I was like, it was almost a way for me to speak on their behalf, you know, and also archive that as well.
Mm. You saying that is making me think about polarities in terms of good and bad and right and wrong, and all these words that we say that allow us to forget that a human is very complex and multi-layered, and that perhaps, as you know, whatever the labels that they're putting you in when they describe you as an artist, that perhaps maybe we can campaign for, like, can we just be an artist, or can we decide how we describe ourselves and self-define, rather than
Yeah.
some other person going, oh, you know, Amma, she's this and this. It's like, no, actually.
I'm more and more just feeling like that, more and more wanting to, or I'm more and more recognizing that I can make whatever art I want. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm,
I'm an artist, so yes, today I want to make work that is predominantly a dance-based work. Tomorrow I want to make work that is a visual film with voiceover and
Mm,
spoken word and music. One isn't that far removed from the other. They're both work that I've made, that have come from me, that I want to make. And that's it. I'm just going to go out and make all the work I want to make, however I want to
yeah.
make it. And I feel so much like that now. Yeah, which is amazing because I tell you, I did not feel like that at the beginning of my journey with well, actually I probably did as a child with all my
Hmm.
creativity, but with specifically with the dance part of my journey, I didn't feel like I didn't have that freedom of mindset and perspective. And it's
Mm.
interesting that I have that perspective now, even though I'm right at the beginning, I feel, of my journey with making work. But
I'm
I
really
feel
excited
it's
for this journey.
me too. I feel excited that I feel like that already because I feel like that normally comes with time, of realizing that you can kind of break free from constraints, whether they be your own or other people's. I just feel like, fuck it, I just want to make the work I want to make in the ways I want to make it, and that's what I'm going to do.
And I think that is, this like that was such a good question that you brought of like, does it have to be like about the hard stuff to get the funding or to get the programming? That actually you can carve out the career that you want to have. And like, yes, okay, there might be some people that are going to say no, but there also might be some people that are going to say yes. And that it's really coming from you and what you want to make and what you want to say, not to get that tick box. You know what I mean? That or like going back to what I was talking about earlier, of there's definitely been times as a performer when I felt like I was being asked to dance out my soul on the stage, but there was no real aftercare or kind of checking in. And that now I'm much more informed that I'm not going to do that for anyone unless I choose to do it and it's empowering for me,
Yes, good for
so
you.
yeah,
So important, that
good for
aftercare.
us.
Yeah, good for us. It's really
Mm.
important.
Yeah, but maybe we have to be the ones that start to go, this is what we need. And it might not have been like this before,
Yeah,
and people might not have said this is what they need before, but actually
now we're
this is what we
saying it.
need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
high 10.
Whoop, whoop. And even like that, taking, I've had loads of no's in my life, but I know how to respond. Like when I get a no and I get the feedback and it's like, okay, cool. So these are the things, yes, okay, there's some theatres that they don't like my work and I'm not meant to be there. Cool. But there's also the places where I might get a no, but it will be like, but these are the things that we liked and this is what we'd like to see in the future. And so it's there's that, that evolving of like, okay, so this is how I'm going to respond to that and this is where I'm going to go next. And I really feel like when we're able to take that criticism and pick it apart, yeah, absolutely. But sometimes I also think like you have to have a thick skin. Like some things people have said to me on this scene have been such unhelpful things. For example, you can't have it all, Ella. Like I remember that when I was describing the piece of work I wanted to make, and I haven't even written the funding bid yet. Actually, that was really unhelpful. Like um, personally, I don't believe that as well. Like I don't believe in telling people that. I don't think that's a helpful mentality. But there's I feel like there's so many things you have to kind of like build this thick skin to and go like, well, why is this person able to have that much funding? I was at that point I just wanted an under 15K, so it was like, actually I can have, it's not asking that much. And I think it's like we've got to raise our standards and raise our belief in ourselves and keep on stepping up and keep on asking for more, because this is a part of us evolving and also stepping into a world where it's not, for example, the white male choreographer who is always getting those big bids and always able to make that kind of like large scale work. And then the women, all of these different layers. But the point of me saying that is evolving, that going, okay, cool, this is the current situation, but this is what I need to change. This is what I need to do differently. And then also being able to kind of distinguish between what are the helpful bits of criticism and what
Yeah,
are the stuff that I'm going to be like, no, that's not,
yeah.
that's just that
That's
person's
for
stuff.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about speaking on what we need and creating the kind of spaces and structure that we need, and creating the work that we want to make. Almost on the flip side to this, how much, as an artist, how much do you feel that you have to sell yourself, or that you're selling yourself through your bio, your show reel, your headshot? Or do you feel like you aren't at all? Like, how much of that feels like this is just me presenting me, and how much of it feels like this is me selling myself?
It's such a good question. Something I'm noticing a lot at the moment is people asking you for a video to go along with projects, which I feel like is quite a big ask, because it's not just like, I mean, I think some people are really, well, a lot of people probably in this world, in these times, are really good at just hopping on and doing a live. And, it's very much a normal part of their life. But for me personally, I'm not really into it. I'm still on a journey with that. And I guess I kind of feel like, well, why do I have to do that? Because I've chosen dance, which is not about words.
Mm-hmm.
and and also as a choreographer, I'm choosing not to be on the stage. I'm actually about to do a solo, so that's definitely me putting myself on the stage. But like if it's, for example, the piece that I've just been working on, it's like, well, why? If I've chosen to be behind the scenes,
Yeah.
it's an interesting and question of like, well, perhaps I don't want to be, like, can I just be a choreographer that doesn't have to be in the limelight, or
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to kind of step into those roles? And I think for me, as quite an introverted extrovert, but yeah, sometimes I just don't want to have to put myself out there in that way. Like it feels like that's a performance in itself. And so I would definitely say I find that sometimes can be difficult. At the same time, if I'm doing a post show talk, I'm getting ready, and it's like there's the energy going into that as well. Um, and I suppose, like, particularly in these different times that we've just been living through, this world of people coming into our homes, that we're so much more kind of
Kind of
online and in our
exposed.
homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I find it very beautiful because our story is who we are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes I really need that separation, that this is my life and then that's my work.
Yes.
I definitely feel that our story is really important. Like, I just booked a new coaching client today, and actually she said, like, I read your story and that was something that was really important, because I knew like I knew about you, and I knew kind of like the connections and the parallels. So I think it's actually quite important who we are.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's always going to have that shiny layer. It's a bio.
Yeah.
It's full of
The
full of all your wins.
highlights.
It's not, yeah, it's not like the polarities. It's the same. It's like that kind of like polished version of
Yeah.
ourselves. So, and the same with a headshot. And my headshots are super out of date, because in lockdown I've grown my hair long, and the last headshot that I had done professionally, I had a shaved head. So and then people are putting that on the events of things, and I'm like, oh god, I could send you like one from before, when I used to have long hair before I shaved my head, but that's quite a lot of years ago.
Yeah.
Or yeah, and I guess like there's still that part of me that's like, I don't really want to just take a photo in my room. I want
Yeah.
to get a professional photo done with a photographer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there are definitely a lot of layers within that.
Yeah, I agree. I so agree. I think you are, of course, you're trying to present the best version of yourself. You're trying to present you, but in your best light. It is a highlights reel. Um,
Imagine if we did a lowlights reel. Or like a bio with the bad bits bios.
oh my gosh, that would be
Yeah, shall
that
we?
would be hilarious.
Yeah. Send them in to us, please, listeners. Your good bits bio and your
It would be so funny. And I think it would be really bonding as well, because it's like, shit, yeah, this person's had that, and this person's been through that,
yeah.
and this person's like,
And how about
not
you?
just me. Like, wow. Yeah, I think there's definitely selling going in there. There is always that kind of shiny exterior, because you need to catch the attention of whoever it is, that you are applying for the job or the role or the this or the that. You want to present all your best achievements and your wins.
I wonder as well, like, what if we didn't, what if someone else wrote for you, or, other ways? Maybe there are artists, probably there are some artists that don't have to write that for themselves. And how good are we really at selling ourselves? How much do we really know? Or is it actually better to have somebody else describe it for you, describe what you do for you?
Interesting. Really interesting. I on the headshot front and selling ourselves, I turned up an audition once with a room full of 9 people, and one of the people on the couch in front of me was my agent, who the agent who I'd been casted to audition, the agent who had casted me and put me forward to audition for this role. And it took quite a few minutes for her to realize who I was, because the headshot she had of me was so dated that my hair was a different color. It was in a different style. My locks were purple. It was up. My hair was long. It was in a pineapple on top of my head. And standing in front of her, my hair was in a short lock bob haircut with a fringe, and it was like auburney colored. And I just thought, wow, yeah, we really are selling ourselves, because when people see you present in one way, of
Yeah.
course, that's who they expect to walk through the door. My headshot was not up to date. So straight away, actually, everyone in the room is adjusting to this person in front of them. And for me, I'm me. I'm like, I see
Mm,
myself every day. Of course, I'm coming to do this audition. What I can do within my being and what I'm going to show you is the same for me, but the whole external picture is now different.
wow.
And so there's an
Yeah.
adjustment going on and a reconciling, like, oh, does she still work for the shoot? Does she work for the vibe we want? Does she communicate the feel we want? Does she, all of those things, actually, they are
Mm,
important depending on what parts of the industry you're working in. So there is an element, I think, of selling yourself as an artist, depending on where you
yeah.
work, what parts of the industry you work in.
One thing I do know for sure is the earth without art is so boring. So grateful to be a creative. It's
Likewise.
such a blessing. Like, I definitely, my career, I had to, like, really fight the conditioning that I had of, like, you need to get a proper job. I did get a proper job for a little while. I realized it just wasn't for me. And then I kind of refocused, and I'm so glad that I have done this, because it's such a joy and it's such an important part of who I am, actually. And it's been, like you said, this kind of making sense of the world through my slightly different eyes that don't do, I'm not so much, I can write an essay, but it's how I make sense of the world. Yeah. There's something in creating art that is just like, it's my heart singing, and it's such a blessing. Um, so I'm not sure if I would be me without art. I do really feel like, it's like I've found my essence, and I've found who I really am through following my path and following my heart, which was through dance, through theatre.
Gorgeous. I feel similar to you. It's such an intrinsic part of who I am, even from when I was very young. I was always creating little side projects, making things, making books, making dances up, always creating. It's intrinsic to my personality. And the fact that I get to do this as a job, the fact that we've made it possible, we've worked and trained and upskilled and developed ourselves to be able to create as our jobs is the best. Of course, it has its challenges and difficulties, but I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. It feels so
Mm.
aligned with who I am at my core.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am AmaRouge, and we are PowerUp Podcast.